Hi everyone, Rich Carlton here. So I want to welcome everyone to another day of FileMaker live streaming where we do awesome content every day. This is Garrett. Garrett is here today. We're doing day 3 of auditing FileMaker Solutions. So day 1 was kind of an overview. We talked about the business and politics of all that kind of stuff, of understanding who the customer is, what they need, why they even called you, right? Because trust me, at the end of the day, most businesses would just rather buy, booze, drugs, things like that, fast cars. They're really not interested in hiring people to do IT or build databases, things like that. But it's a necessary part of the competitive business environment, so they have to put money into it. And a lot of times they need a new in-house developer because the old one got old and retired or whatever happened. And so they're looking to bring that person on board either as a contractor or as an employee. And so we're spending 5 days talking about the process of auditing the solution, looking at what they have. Whether you've been hired or not, you need to kind of have an idea of what you're getting into before maybe you fully commit to it. And so the first day was really understanding kind of the big picture of it. And my encouragement to everyone, including my staff, that you want to get the best fit, a good fit with the customer. You just don't want to get it no matter what. I got to have the job, got to have the job. The road to hell is got to have the job, right? Got to get that no matter what, because we talked to Kyle affectionately about working at Victoria's Secret and doing the job interview on Monday. And what I caution Kyle is just because of Victoria's Secret, you don't want, I got to have that. Kyle goes, I got to have the job. It'll be the best job ever. And I'm like, but what if they're bad bosses? What if the database is really horrible? What if you're not a good fit, right? And Kyle's like, I don't know. It's going to be a really great job. So, you don't want to be emotionally attached to something before you make a decision on it, right? I mean, I guess that's what marriage is about, emotional attachment. But outside of getting married, right, you try to be objective about it, right, Garrett? You're going to be objective about it before you get into it and overcommit, yes?
Yeah, definitely. I had at the top of my notes here, this is the used car sales lot of development. Basically, you want to audit either new to you database. So you want to get under the hood before you commit to this.
Yeah, big time. And so Garrett's here. Garrett's not been part of the previous conversations. He's only here for 1 day, but it's the benefit of talking to another one of my senior engineers. You get a little bit different perspective. We're going to cover some different topics today. So yesterday, I'm going to jump over to Slack real quick. I'm going to pop up what we were doing with Slack. Was it Calvin did that yesterday? Where was that Calvin list at? Here is the Calvin list from yesterday. I'm going to move this over here. So he said, how's your app work? The questions you guys basically covered. I'm talking about numbering and organization is a solution that you're looking at the used car lot. Remember the first day we talked about the analogy, Garrett, was that you're being hired to fly a plane for a business. Very important, right? Because the health and the welfare of the business very well could rely upon that plane flying around successfully and not crashing.
Right.
But you're not being hired to take it off. It's already in the air. It's already flying, right? You're like being beamed into the cockpit mid-flight, right? It's like, hey, the pilot died. Does anyone here know how to fly a plane, right? And so you're gonna like, oh, well, do I want to fly this plane? Because it's already in flight. Now we talked about the analogy. You get there and you find out both engines are on fire and you're out of coffee, okay, then you might not want to take the job, okay? Now, if you get there, they're running low on coffee and one engine's on fire, as a good FileMaker developer, if you're a senior developer with good skills, you could probably deal with that and make that better for them. But if the plane is already like, inverted upside down going in and everything's on fire and they're out of coffee on top of that, you probably don't want to take that job. Don't be afraid to say no, is what I tell my team.
Or at least be able to set the customer's expectations.
Y'all gonna die. Y'all gonna
Right.
die, and then after that, yeah.
You're all gonna die. Let's invest in a shiny new airplane instead of trying to
Yeah, and that is a
tear
possibility.
everything down to the screws.
Yeah. So the question is, can we fix it, right? And I think most of the time you can fix a solution. I know a lot of developers like only want to build new solution. Yeah, we'd all could love to. I'd love a big stack of gold coins and win the lotto. And let me think about this. So one of the things we want to talk about were I want to hit a couple low-hanging fruit things, Garrett, first up on this topic. So before I should probably cover the upcoming broadcast schedule. So I'm going to put this over your head so no one can see you briefly. So today is going to be day 3 of the audit. Then we have the day 4, and Friday is day 5. I may need to get a little help. I am supposed to apparently be still talking to I've got 2 meetings with Claris on Friday. And so it's going to probably cut into this a little bit. So that's the upcoming broadcast there. Pretty exciting stuff. I'm going to flip myself the other way real quick. So, and then a reminder, of course, if you want, we're going to reference during the day our training. Margaret's going to have topics in our training. We can't teach you everything about the audit trail, or auditing, not audit trail, but auditing a solution. It takes time. It takes skills to do this. It's stuff that we cover during our live streams. It's covered over the course of hundreds of hours of video training. And if you want to get that video training, you simply go to the FM training website right here at the top. You go to FM training, you have the live training, which is how you see the upcoming broadcast schedule. This is automatically updated out of FileMaker. Ooh, we use FileMaker for our website. Very cool. And then you come over here to bundles, and one of these bundles is what you want to do. We don't even sell individual courses anymore. We have too many of them, right? All right, so real quick. So that was that. We're done with that. So Garrett, you are there. We have our list of things. So the first thing we want to talk about today is when you're going to an audit, and if we talk about this on Monday a little bit, is talking to the customer and finding out where their pain points are. So recently, we have this is a real combat situation. Garrett was not wounded in this, but there were bullets flying. So you went to a customer site. What did the customer report to you, Garrett? You said, hey, checking in, what's going on? Let's audit your solution. And they reported, what did they report to? This was that customer in Texas there we talked about.
That they had a database that was 285 gigs in size. And so obviously they were having trouble backing it up. And
so what happens when people have a hard time backing up? What do they do with their backups? What do they do?
Ignore them or space them out every 2 hours rather than hourly, once a day instead of hourly.
Yeah.
In general, just make mistakes.
Yeah. And so the easiest way, if your backups don't work very well, then the easiest thing instead of fixing is just to shut the backups off, right? Which is kind of what happens. So 285 gigabyte database. I don't know that's the biggest I've ever seen, but it's up there. It's up there because you're heading towards, when you start talking hundreds and hundreds of gigs, you're heading towards a terabyte of data. And I was like, man, they have a lot of text data, but we thought it might be containers, right? So you want to talk about this a little bit, Garrett?
Yeah. So we got the call. It's 285 gigs, and so we said, well, let's take a look. And myself and Jacob Taylor jumped on it. He started looking at the server side. I kind of started looking at the database side. And there was a lot of data. So our initial plan was let's get in there, see how much data, and then maybe we can archive out some, a couple of years of past data. That was our kind of initial conversation with the customer. Once we got in there, though, it was all in one table, actually. There was one table specifically where they were doing some on-site quotes. They had salespeople in the field. They were doing on-site quotes, and they were taking pictures of different items that they were quoting. And the images were all stored in internal container fields. So we had, I think there was over 800,000 records in that table, and there was 2 container fields that were all internal containers. So obviously that was an immediate red flag, and so what we ended up doing, and I don't know, is we spun up kind of a development. First, we talked through all the different options with the customer. They decided for us to go forward and try to fix a solution. So what we did is spun up a kind of a development machine. We took a full-size copy of the database, and we tried just wiping that table. We wanted to see, how much size we could get out of there. So with the truncate function, that new function from 18 that's in there, we were able to truncate the table, and we got it down to under 10 gigs in size. So obviously with that one table, that was where all the data was. So that then told us that's exactly where we needed to start cutting. And so we then tried to just straight move the containers external. So if you go into manage database, you look at a container field, you could tell it if you want it to be internal or external. We made that switch on the fields, and it ended up crashing FileMaker, crashing the database because there was just too much data for it to move. So obviously all this, we're working on a copy of the database. We're not doing this on the live database because we don't want to cause problems. So we started with another fresh copy of the database. And what we ended up doing in order to get it down to size is we started, I wrote basically just a looping script that would go to that table, find, sorry, let me back up one step. On top of moving these containers to external, they decided that they wanted to go ahead and archive out a couple of years of data. So we kind of had a two-step plan. So we were already archiving out. So what we decided is, well, since we can't move all these containers external, what we'll do first is delete the records that we're going to be archiving. And then whatever's left over the last 2 years, I think we decided to keep 2020 and 2021, whatever's left within those 2 years, that should be enough that we can then just move those external without crashing FileMaker. So that's what we ended up doing. We went in, we wrote basically just a basic looping script that would narrow the found set to 50,000 records at a time, because that's kind of where we found kind of a sweet spot. Find those 50,000 records, delete them, close the file. When you close the file, it runs the compact, the compact cleanup on the file. So it'd do that compact cleanup. That would take like another 45 minutes just to run the compact cleanup. We'd reopen the file, delete another 50,000 records, close the file. By the time we got done archiving the data, we were down to about 200,000 records. And at that point, we did the move to the external open. We chose external open on the containers, and it processed all of those fine. So we were able to process those, move those external, and then put the file back online. I don't think I covered that up front, but we did all this in a copy of the database, and we did it all in just opened locally in FileMaker Pro. One thing to note about moving containers from internal to external, excuse me, that actually is, there's a bug in FileMaker 19 that you cannot do that when the file is hosted. So you have to close the file, open it in FileMaker Pro, and make that move. I also had problems doing it with the file hosted on FileMaker Server 18. I don't think that's a bug that's been reported, but I had issues with it, so we decided just to do all the external container moving on FileMaker Pro.
So this is really important to those of you who missed the memo on this. And I was adjusting the color a little bit for the Discord YouTube people. It's still a little dark. I need to figure out how to get the gamma setting there. There's a gamma setting I need to adjust. But real quick, so disregard the camera adjustments that are going on. So the issue primarily is one where FileMaker, and this stuff was largely coded by a guy who retired. Hopefully someone else can fix it. John Thatcher retired, really good guy. He also worked on the first builds of Linux, the Linux version of FileMaker Server. Very talented guy. I love him. He's the one who helped debug and fix the functionality where you have an internal container versus an external container, and you go into field definition, you change it, and it's supposed to move everything. Right now in 19, if it's hosted, it's really broke. It's not broke a little bit, it's broke a lot. It's really, frankly, bad. And so I guess we're potentially some issues with the 19 client with that. So what we did is we would take the file off the server, make it local, leave it on the server. So we'd open a copy of Pro 18 on server and do that change there. So for those of you, I guarantee most of you don't know about this, but if you try to do an internal external conversion right now and it's hosted, you're going to get a bunch of error message, and the error messages say unable to make the change because a user was record locked the record. So if you had 10 users using a database or 50 users using a database, and you had all these containers, 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 records might be locked. But it shows that every record in the database is locked, and it prevents any of the containers from moving. So it's a fundamental bug that they've got to fix. Hopefully Jacob has reported this to them. So understand that the transfer functionality right now in 19 is broke, quite broke. And so I've been able to reproduce it on my Mac server with Mac clients, with actually 18 server with 19 client. I don't know where this bug is at, but it's been around for a while. So you need to make it local and use 18 client. It's not good. It was, that database I had with all the aviation stuff in it, I did a test there and it failed to move everything over. I was like, wow, really? So,
yeah, when I tried on 18, it actually partially worked. It was like a fourth of them moved, but then the rest of them got that same record locking error. And when it happens, it's like the records are locked by admin, and I'm the only one logged in with the admin,
right. So,
password. So it's like it's locked by yourself, which makes no sense. So
yeah, yep. So welcome to that world of bugs. So hopefully Jacob will get an update on that. So that's a very important one. So 250 a 200 some odd gigabyte database became 13 gigs of data.
Yeah. By the time we got done, it was 13 gigs of FileMaker data, and the rest was external containers. So
meeting a customer, finding out, why they're calling you, and it's a customer, and it is a customer, and we haven't named the customer, right? We haven't named the customer at all. We haven't named them. Good. Yeah, so it was interesting with this customer because they're IT people. This is something else you run into, and I just thought we'd share this. They're IT people. Remember we talked about in the first day we had that slide where we talked about the IT people were either generally they'll be apathetic and they won't care and they kind of leave FileMaker alone, or they're trying to be positive and helpful and they're kind of pro FileMaker, or they're very anti FileMaker and they'll work against you. This customer here was kind of neutral, apathetic, but they refused to do database restorations correctly. They would always want to use a crashed file, even though we gave them written instructions on how to do it correctly, and they kept doing this. I had to, from Richard, it's one of those moments where when I was younger, I didn't understand kind of this chain of command issue. Because if Garrett has something to say and him and Jacob tell someone this, they should listen. But apparently it means more to people if I say something, which is kind of goofy, but it is. And so I sent an email to their CEO, and I know that the CEO of this company had gotten promoted to the CEO job. He doesn't own the company, but partially because of the success of this system. The system was a very, very successful system, and fixed a whole bunch of issues this company had. And I sent him an email saying, you've been promoted to this job. Congratulations. It's really great. I said, your IT guys are literally going to, I'm going to say this very carefully, you big time, because they're going to crash your file and you're not going to be able to get it back because they're using a crash file and it's going to incorporate damage into the file. And I think I said the F word in the email. I said, I respect you, I like you, but they're literally drinking and driving blind with no seatbelt on at the same time with your database, not their database, their IT. You're the CEO, it's your database. And after that, did he take it a little more serious? Did they take it more seriously down there?
Yeah, definitely. That definitely lit a fire under them. But honestly, I mean, to show how dense some people are sometimes, the IT still was resistant really until I showed them, if you do the startup restoration on a server of that size, it was taking like 20 hours to get the file back online. So they're literally down for like a whole day when the server would crash. And I showed them, hey, you grab a good copy of the backup, you're back up and running in under 15 minutes. And it really took until I showed them that amount of time savings that they're like, oh, well, when can we get this done? So it was kind of a combination of the two. But yeah, the CEO, definitely that email, got him motivated. And then for some reason, the IT was still super resistant. So that part was frustrating for Jacob and I.
Yeah,
sure.
well, that gentleman may need some new IT people. If the CEO gives you instructions, you don't want to do it. Then you need new IT people. So, all right, well, okay, good. Well, Josh is there. Yeah, one second. I want to say Josh says he has 146 gigs of data. Josh, I'm assuming that's text data, not images, right? That would be a big text file. That's a big file. Yeah. Go ahead, Margaret. You have a question? There was a question posted.
Yes, we do. Can you discuss how you change from internal to external storage locally, if I understand correctly, and then move to server? I haven't moved external storage to server. Is that easy or hard?
So the move is easy. You just have to know the file path does change a little bit when you open it with FileMaker Pro versus server. Basically, the file path is just 2 levels down on server versus pro. So if you have a local file open in FileMaker Pro, right next to your database file, you'll see a folder that's called Files. That's the default location where FileMaker Pro puts it. When you move that to the server, there's say your file's called ABC. There's a container file called, or there's your RC. I forget the name of the file, RC data or something like that.
Yeah, that's not Richard. Rick Kalman used to give me a joke of that's not Richard Carlton, right?
Yeah,
it's not Richard.
So that there's that folder, and then inside there will be a folder, your ABC. It's the name of the file, and then within that is where you drag and put that files directory that's created when you move the containers on FileMaker Pro. So if it's not automatically there, you just can create. At least if you're on Windows, you can Windows Server, you can create the files, the folders, and then put your files folder right there. And it'll, when you open the file in FileMaker Server, it'll see it and go look at a container, make sure it's there. If it's not the end of the world. Just close the file down and fix your file path and then reopen the file. You're not gonna you're not going to mess anything up just because it doesn't immediately see the containers. You can close the file and move them again. Just make sure you don't move the file folder while the file is open.
Yes.
Would be
good.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Cool. All right. So Josh Sherman reports 146 gigs of text data. So that's pretty impressive. That's a big database.
Nice.
Well, it's nice. It's also Josh has to be a serious expert in very lightweight, lean design, right? Because if it's not leanly designed, it's going to be slow and painful. So we have the containers. Sometimes the people report performance problems, or they're so if you have a server problem. Kind of part of the conversation tomorrow is discussing kind of the server backup inspection process. That's the Jacob Taylor kind of conversation. Yep. But so we have backups, and then you have overall performance, and once again, if you have interactive containers, do you have any customers where you use interactive containers?
Not really.
Because that's
most
road to hell is paved with interactive containers. One of the ways of doing that.
Yeah, pretty much. I have one customer that views. They use them just to view the images or the PDFs in there. At that one, about once a year, they have, because they're interactive containers, about once a year we have some bug with it, and I have to go and edit something. But in general, when using containers, I try to just use it as a container and then use open, a button that pops open if it's a Word document, pops it open in Word on the user's computer or something like that. But yeah. In general, that's how I like to use it, because it works. It doesn't break. So
yeah, which is kind of a big thing. It doesn't cause a performance hit. It doesn't spin up extra processes. I'll probably get a little bit more information on that, an update on that Friday when I would chat with Claris a little bit. Let's see. So moving on. So other topics that you wanted to discuss off your checklist.
And some of these might have already been covered some this week, but when I come in, and I've done this many times, get handed a database that was started by another developer. This is kind of just a checklist I made in 5 minutes of stuff that I always check for. One, I check for, I go into field definitions, check for unstored calculations. Not that I don't want any, but I just want to know that they're not using all unstored calculations, because I've had databases, I open it up and literally every single display field that they're using on a layout is an unstored calculation. So go into field definitions, sort by, field type, and just kind of scroll through. How many unstored calculations are being used? How many summary fields are being used? Just making a mental note. And then later on, as you kind of look through the layouts, see if those are being used or not. One other thing that in field definitions, while in there, I'll look, is there any sort of naming convention used for field names? Just as a help to me, because if lots of times you're being put in this situation, you don't have access to the previous developer. So if there's some kind of naming convention going on, that can help your kind of transition into the role. I always look for ID fields and for general maintenance. So I call maintenance fields. So you always want to have a primary key in every table. I always have like an ID constant in every table, and just basic creation and modification timestamps. In the newer versions of FileMaker, you create a new table, it automatically creates those for you. That's not always been the case. So you get these older databases that when FileMaker you would create a new table, it's just all blank, and developers would not add as simple as a get last modification timestamp field. So just making a note of those. Are they there? Are they not there? If they're not there, I'll usually immediately create them, just so they're there. Those are kind of some of the top level highlights that I'm looking. Just a note, tools to use if you're doing this type of an audit. The developer assistant tool, that's a plugin that lets you search through database definitions or scripts. The Monkey Bread plugin also has similar functions. I just tend to use the developer assistant tool. But one of those two plugins will make doing this type of an audit so much easier, because you can type in certain keywords and just let it search through scripts, search through field definitions. So those I'd like to make mention that'll make your life so much easier. Some other things that if you're coming into the situation that you want to know that it's being used, are there any APIs that the database is connecting to? Not necessarily that you need to jump right in and learn that before you take on the project, but if the database is connecting to Dropbox, I need to be aware of that, because if I take on this job, I'm going to be, tasked with maintaining that. So if Dropbox rolls out, a new version of their API, and something breaks, I'm going to, have to go in there and fix it. So once again, that's where this, developer assistant or Monkey Bread comes in handy, because you can search for, insert from URL, codes, the script step, because most of the time that's how you connect to APIs. So you can search for that and make note of where those are used. Also, audit logs. I like to know if there is audit logs in the database or not. Mostly because they can just be done really crappy. It goes back to the whole performance of the database thing. If you have a crappy built audit log, it can really affect the performance of the database. Years ago, we had another customer that came to us. The performance was just dragging. Loading a single record with a few fields was taking forever, and we found that they had these audit logs that were tracking basically all the changes on the table, but the audit logs had gotten so big, like an audit log on one record was like almost a gig in size. So that database, once again, just blew out of control because the audit logs weren't done right. Plugins, if the database uses any plugins, once again, like with the APIs, not that you need to necessarily address anything with the plugins, but you need to know that plugins are being used, which plugins are being used. Is it plugins that you trust? Are they going to be supported going forward? You have to have confidence in that. If you don't have confidence, make a recommendation to replace it with something that you do trust. Server-side scripting. So, if the perform script on server script step is being used a lot, or I'm sure Jacob will get into tomorrow, but running server-side scripts, you set scheduled scripts on the server. Is there a lot of those being used? Not that those are bad, but how often are they being used? What are they being used for? Are those going to interrupt backup schedules or cause any other issues that you need to be aware of? And then the last obvious thing would be, are there any type of other connections to the database? So websites, Claris Connect, any sort of other type of connection that's dumping data either in or out of your database that you need to be aware of. A lot of these are things that, your initial conversation with the customer, they should be aware of, if they're using plugins, if they have a website connected to it. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you're the new developer. Sometimes you're talking to a new staff member that doesn't necessarily know what was developed in the database. They're just kind of in charge of handling requests. So always do your due diligence and look for this type of stuff, because otherwise you're getting that used car with bad transmission, and you're gonna be trying to look for a way to return it in 6 months. So
these are pretty good questions, and once again, the benefit of having another senior engineer come in is to get their take on what they're looking at, what their things they're keying off of. Once again, it's personal experience. I think the best way of finding a happy medium in the world is to listen to a number of people do it, what they go through, what they're looking at, etc. Kyle says, when I started with my employer, their database was over 120 gigs. They had hourly backups. In the middle of the day, their database would start to crash the server. This was caused by overlapping backups, right? And that's a problem that I remember Nick Hunter running into with a customer. He had a customer who you've probably seen information for one way or the other, but this customer had a PSOS process that was so fat and intensive it would take it about an hour and 30 minutes to run, but it was scheduled to run every hour. So they literally had like 30 hours or 25 hours or 26 hours of scripting to run in a 24-hour period, which basically cartwheels in on top of itself and explodes. It shouldn't explode FileMaker, but you really need a robot to do that. It shouldn't be on the server.
I was in that initial meeting with Nick.
What, that customer? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
right? Oh.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That was crazy because they had that running on some server that had like 264 gigs of RAM or something nuts. Like it.
Oh, I remember this. Yes, and the RAM, but they never. But okay, but see, this is what happens. So here, everyone. Everyone. Psst, I have a secret. Hello, internet. Are you in there, internet? Hello. You need to listen to our training, right? A lot of you, and I'm not talking to Josh, but most of you set up FileMaker servers and you don't read the instructions or you don't dig deep. And FileMaker server by default has a very low cache setting. So we had a customer with 250 gigs of RAM memory with SSDs and everything, but their cache setting was like 164 gigs or something, Garrett, something really horrible. Really horrible. And what happened is that it was horribly slow. And never mind the fact that they were doing too much with PSOS. But their server guys were like, yeah, we're IT, we're server guys, we're badass, right? Except that, Anyway, so we end up, so our server guy, Jacob, goes, well, we're going to move you to a Windows server on Amazon. Oh, we'll try it out. We don't know if it's any better. So Jacob moves it to like not even a very big server, right? This is that customer, not a very big server. It had 16 gigs of memory and just fraction of the horsepower. But he set the cache settings correctly. And they're like, oh my God, it's so much better than our server. And it's like, it shouldn't have been. It should have been slower. But because they don't listen So when we do training, I tell people, buy the training. You know, if you don't want to buy the training, then go to every DevCon and go to everywhere, and it lives in every session and have 10 years of experience and build your own servers. Then you don't need my training. But otherwise, yeah. And they were like, amazed. Jacob Taylor, he's the most amazing guy ever. He walks on water. It's like, no, dude, I actually just set the cache. I don't let it set it to default, right? So, oh my gosh. So anyway, cool. Well, it's we're a little bit pea sauce, yes. Pea sauce, yes. So I don't know what you think about this, Josh. We never asked you about this because we don't really circle in the same ponds too much, but we try to keep pea sauce on the light, snuggly side of, if we can do it in a couple of minutes or something, that's great. But running it for 30 minutes or an hour where you run the risk of blowing up that kind of invisible client on the server, we try to avoid that. We'll use a local robot machine that's next to it on the same network slice. Not as fast, but you also have the resiliency of having it blow up and not take out your server when it does it. So I don't know if you have some thoughts on that, but we try to keep it light and snuggly. Garrett, what's your rule of thumb on light and snuggly? Right? It's kind of a, what is light and snuggly?
I mean, I don't have any hard rule. It kind of just depends customer to customer. If it's something, well, lots of times for PSOS specifically, I'll use if I can get an immediate answer. So I'm making a call, doing a find, and getting back some type of result within, under a minute. If it's gonna take a couple minutes for something to run, then I'll either have it as a scheduled script on the server that runs, once an hour to do it, or a robot machine. But yeah, I like to keep my PSOS calls short and sweet, so that way they're not stacking and keeping the user waiting.
Yeah, they stack, and they theoretically are supposed to run multi-threaded, but it's FileMaker at the end of the day is really a single-threaded process. It really, if you think about it, everything that we do, we think about in single thread. Like A goes to B and C goes to D. It's like connecting the dots, and there's no this parallel right, where it's one dot and it goes really use all the process and it comes back together and gives you one result. It's because the way it works and the way we train our brains as developers to work, we don't think in parallel like that. Like, well, how can we do this in parallel and have it do it and then come to the end, right? So, yeah. So,
and it's very. I know with the new stuff, it's supposedly you can just let it run and come back and it finishes when it finishes. I'm not to the point where I absolutely trust that yet, because you get into all sorts of weird record locking. Where you call something, let it loose on the server, and then 5 other users can't access the data they want because the PSOS went ahead and locked up a bunch of records. So I know there's ways to be careful and to keep out of that, but it's a lot easier for the user to understand that it basically, if I push a button, something's happening and I'm seeing the result. And if it's not something that the user immediately needs to see, then I'll queue it up somewhere and have either a scheduled script or a robot take care of it. It's definitely old school thinking with the way FileMaker's running with some of their stuff, but it keeps you out of trouble.
Well, yeah,
put it that way.
Yeah, if you can do whatever the gee whiz fangled stuff is, the newest stuff, but if it's going to get your database crashed or blown up, or the customer in any way is going to result in my phone, I have a red phone here somewhere, wherever it went, the customer calling and writing like, Garrett, I got 25 people and no one's, well, we had that the other day and the customer blew themselves up. So as a side note, we are kind of landing the plane here. As a side note, as a reminder, Claris, and I got a customer that I sent him a note. Again, I got Claris will be shutting down what they referred to as Cloud 1.0. It officially be terminated, I think shut off like January 22nd of this coming January 22nd. And so for those of you who are using Cloud 1, we've sent notes and emails to everyone. And we have a customer who refuses to move. And they also lost their ear password. They set the ear password, they uploaded the file. And so we've got it wired up. We had a live stream on this, Garrett, the emergency Star Trek transporter, where we beam them right off the pad because we still have administrative access to the server, because the server itself has the EAR password saved with the Cloud One server, but we have no way of getting it, no way of getting it out. Because of that, if the server gets shut down, we lose administrative level access to the file. We cannot use the emergency Star Trek transporter. So we told the customer, without me telling you the customer's name, they go, hey, you folks need to do this. You need to do this. Oh, we're too busy adding new features today. But I said, you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose all of it. And I said, this letter, and I didn't set it up. I said, I don't know the password. I can't stop this. And Claris has given you over a year of warning. And you're just they keep ignoring it. And it's not even January 22nd. If your license runs out, Claris won't renew the license for Cloud One. They just won't do it. And eventually what happens is your server, they do this auto restart thing at night. Eventually the server is not going to restart. It's not going to come back up, right? And so,
wow.
So Oregon Dean, Cloud One, yeah, you are living very dangerously. At least get the file off and have a copy of it, but it's like the people, as soon as they came out with EAR and said EAR is a requirement, and then promptly, you know what people do? They do an EAR password, then they would forget it. And I've done that twice, the little stupid files myself, and I'm like, oh, that was really dumb. So now I try not to use EAR unless I really duct tape it and tattoo it to my arm and stuff like that. So just, yeah. So yeah.
Well, you can't use Cloud without it here, right? So
yeah, it requires it, but in Cloud 2, if you go to the web interface, you can right-click on the file and say "Show me" and authenticate,
yeah.
and it'll let you see the EAR. But you have to authenticate and go through that, which is great, thank God. But it's an ugly situation, and we have this customer and I actually sent them another CEO to CEO note. And I've had to do this twice in the last 9 months or 3 months. It's like, hey, you guys are living dangerously. Warning, you're going to lose your. And this letter serves a formal notification that I expect you to lose everything. And if you don't want to, and I gave that email to them a month ago, and they've sat on it. So they're like, yeah. So it's like, but I sleep well at night knowing that they've been warned, right? So I can send them to Josh. Josh could talk to them. Josh, you have a way of negotiating with people who refuse to. Not do stupid things like, I really want to drink and drive at the same time. So much better when I'm driving and drinking together. Garrett, anything else on your end? We'll have to see what YouTube does with that.
No, I don't think so. Be open to any questions, but it's always worth your time to put in a little bit of research up front when you're taking on a project like this. So.
Okay. Oregon Dean says, interestingly, I uploaded a new certificate a couple days ago. FileMaker was happy, but DAPI was not. Yes, and when using CLI to remove the cert in a free new 9 days, cert weren't to carry me to. Yeah, so that's at. There was that every 90 days they reissue. It's a free SSL thing, but there was problems with it working with FileMaker, right? It works great with Apache and IIS, but. It's that open source free. I can't remember the damn title of it. Jacob here. It's really a conversation. Oregon Dan, I don't know if you're around tomorrow. Are you operating on someone tomorrow? If you're not operating someone, come back and we'll talk about it. All right. Well, I'm going to cut everyone loose. I appreciate it. The time is up. We'll catch you tomorrow. Tomorrow's more of a server bent on inspecting the server and what you're looking for, what Jacob has seen. It'll be a more dirty laundry. If you want to hear the dirty laundry stories of Jacob Taylor, they're ugly. Bring some Tide to wash the laundry. All right. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Guys just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected, the quarterback. Great read. good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Try to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap, stands in, throws it left for Amendola, reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10, rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, again he makes the grab.